Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a way of life which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. So I just want you to highlight and note, not like highlight, just note. This whole first paragraph is about honesty. What I want you to kind of maybe note in this reading is those who do not recover. So it's telling me the people that aren't going to recover right off the bat are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Completely give themselves to this simple program. This isn't like a half measures thing. I do this part-time and I'm fucking on with my day-to-day life. If you're as seriously as alcoholic drug addict as I am, there is no middle of the road solution. And at first, like we talked about before, this almost seems like it's a life sentence when you first get here. And it's not really the best place that you ever wanted to be. You didn't think you'd ever be here. But I'm telling you that the gifts will come down the road. And if you don't groove this shit in your life in the first year, 2 years, it's a long fucking road, man. And trust me, I see people struggle trying to stay sober and trying to get some emotional sobriety. They don't understand the step work and working with others. And there's a whole path here. There's a whole way of life here. You know, it starts with walking in the door, doing the steps, developing a relationship with God, helping other people, doing inventories. Like, fuck, there's a whole bunch of things that we got to do. And at first it's not a lot of fun. But you know what? 5 years in, for me, I love looking for inventories now. I like looking for the flaws in myself so I can correct them. I love looking for newcomers. I love going to meetings. I don't go to meetings for relief. I go to meetings to carry the message. I don't do this because I need relief. I do this because I fucking love doing it, right? It changes over time. And it's what we call the altruistic actions turned into actual altruism later. And then this line's pretty important too. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. And I think that's the biggest thing. When I do step fives with people, most people are never honest with themselves, which is why they have to drink. They've never listened to the fundamental idea of God within them, that internal guidance system, the one that tells you what to do and what's wrong and what's right. We start listening to our minds and we don't listen to this thing and we're going against ourselves. And if you go against yourself so much, you have to drink. You have to drink. I don't know how many step fives I've done and I said, you know what, bro? You've never told your truth. You've always fucking people pleased for somebody else. You've never wanted confrontation. You've never been able to have a voice for yourself. Of course you had to drink because you've been lying to yourself your whole fucking life. And that inner voice will connect you with infinite intelligence. And once you start listening to that, you never have to justify anything in your life. And to me, it's such a big part of this, man, because you have to drink if you don't listen to that voice. You have to drink. It's just, there's no other way. And this is important too. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. That's what this program is about in a nutshell. This program will help you grasp and develop a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty. And rigorous means accurate. Rigorous doesn't mean like I fucking go at this with like emotion. Rigorous means accurate honesty. It means let's get to the real truth of what we're talking about. And that's what this program does. We have so many kinds of inventory. We rely on our pillars. We get feedback from our pillars and we start getting honest with ourselves on the deep inside. Once I get this rigorous honesty deep down within, I don't need to drink. I don't need to justify. I'm listening to true self. And that is what rigorous honesty, a part of it is. And we start seeing the rigorous honesty in step 4, when you do your fourth column. It's like, holy shit, I've been lying to myself my whole life. And I get to see the truth. You know, how many people came into Alcoholics Anonymous thinking they were an alcoholic and spent a month here and go, I'm totally an alcoholic, right? How many people came here, you know, thinking God was, you know, nothing and I'm not going to believe in God, and 2 months later you believe in God? Like, we have so many blocks in our head. We have so many ideas in our head. We have so many ingrained belief and behavior systems in our head. But they're not all true. That's why the key to gateway to true knowledge is open-mindedness. We just got to, that whole chapter, We Agnostics, was about you can change your mind. We can change our mind, and we can change our mind with anything. If you don't forgive somebody, all it takes is a deep concession going, you know what? I'm going to try to forgive that person. That's all it takes. But we'll hold on to that fucking resentment because we feel they deserve our anger, right? But the only one that hurts is you. We don't have to hold on to anger anymore. You can make the decision to let this shit go. Because it's just an idea that you've created and I've created. I created lots of ideas. But it took some time to figure out how to let it go. But there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions. There it is again. So if you're working with a sponsee, this is a great place where you say, are you willing to go to any length? And they'll always say yes, right about now. But you keep hammering that home, because once the ego reasserts itself as you go along, they're not really willing to go to any lengths. They're willing to do anything you say right now, because life's pretty bad. But a month down the road, when they got a job back, and some women are interested in them, or some guys are interested in the women, things really change. The person who came in here desperate to do anything, and they'll do anything you tell them, they start thinking they know a thing or two, and they'll tell you what's best for them. I see it happen over and over. We read it in Jim's story the other day. All went well for a while. Fred's story, all went well for a time. It goes good until the person thinks they know what's best for them again. But the person usually doesn't know. They usually don't. They usually think they do, and then they make mistakes and they're drunk again. And that's where I come in, because I'm the guy who doesn't mind telling you, I'm going to tell you your future. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you, I'll see you here next fucking year when you're relapsed again, and you probably got a whole trail of destruction behind you again. That's what I do. I'm telling you your future, because it's black and white, man. This is the same shit over and over. But everyone thinks they're so fucking unique, but we're not. This disease is it's very straightforward. And the behaviors of every human are very straightforward and very similar. And I just see the same shit over and over. So I'm going to predict your future. And then in a year, you're going to be pissed off at me when I see you. And then you're going to say, yeah, it happened like that. But that's good. At least you didn't die and you got another chance, right? And that's the message that I like to carry. I'm not here to bullshit you. I just heard of another guy died today. Another guy who I know really well died today. He's been surrendering to this program for fucking 4 years. He died. I just found out he died the other day. And then another guy I sponsored I know really well, I had his dad call me today, and he's fucking missing. He's been missing for a week. His phone hasn't been hitting any towers, and I talked to him 2 weeks ago, and he's tried everything. He keeps trying everything except surrendering to this simple program. And like my gut instinct tells me he's probably not in a good place right now, and he's probably dead. His dad called me. I haven't talked to his dad for a year. Like, this fucking disease kills people, man. Like, daily, man. Fucking, it's unbelievable. If you're willing to go in any length to get it, then you're ready to follow directions. And some of these you may balk. What does balk mean? Well, most people are going to say balk means, I just kind of, nah, not really. Well, I'm going to give you the explanation that I like using with sponsees. What is balk? If anyone knows baseball, professional baseball, the pitcher sits on the mound and he gets into the pitching position and he looks at the back catcher, And then he lifts up his leg and then he starts to throw the ball. So once he starts this process of winding up in full circle, throw the ball, he has to follow through with the full process. And if he stops halfway or 3/4 of the way into that and doesn't throw the ball, then the umpire looks at him, points at him, and yells balk. And what it is you didn't follow through and now you're penalized. So the team gets penalized and the pitcher gets penalized. Why? Because he didn't follow through. At some of these we balked. At some of these steps we balk. And if we don't follow through with these steps, there are penalties. And the ultimate penalty is death. But there's penalties along the way. So at some of these you may balk. You may think you can find an easier, softer way. We doubt if you can. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go, absolutely. Remember that you are dealing with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for you. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. You must find him now. I love that. It's not may you find him now. It's you must find him now. Because honestly, without a working God in your life, being an alcoholic drug addict, you're in fucking trouble, man. You're in serious trouble. I see people try to skirt around the God part for fucking years. It's not an area you skirt around. Without a step two, man, a willingness, and then growing that willingness into a belief, conscious companionship, it's a long road, man. You can know you're an alcoholic drug addict all you want, but God is your solution. So that one is God. You must find him now. I love how Bill writes that. It's just boom. You have to, and you have to. So anyone who works with me as their sponsor, you know the very first day when we're working together, because I am about God. This solution is God, and I hammer it home for the next 3 months as we work together. You call me, I ask you, did you go to God? And where's your big book? And it's about God, because it's about God. It's not about me. It's not about the sponsor. It's about God as first sponsor. I'm just a conduit to help you get to your God that's going to save your ass, save your life, and hopefully turn over more of your life to that God and make your life even better than you ever expected. Half measures will avail you nothing. Half measures avail you relapse is what half measures avail you. You stand at the turning point. Throw yourself under his protection and care with complete abandon. Now we think you can take it. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as your program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I want you to pay attention to step number 7 that I read here. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely willing that God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly, on our knees, asked him to remove our shortcomings, holding nothing back. If that doesn't sound like full surrender, I don't know what does. Humbly, on our knees, asked God to remove our shortcomings, holding nothing back. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make complete amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual experience as the result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. You may exclaim, what an order. I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas. A, that you are an alcoholic and cannot manage your own life, period. B, that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism, period. And that God can and will. God can and will, period. If you're not convinced on these 3 vital issues, you ought to reread the book to this point, or else throw it the fuck away. What the fuck are we talking about? If you're not convinced by the time you get to this spot in the book of A, B, and C, Bill W. says, you know what? You ought to reread it or throw it away, because it ain't going to fucking work for you. And A is step 1, B is step 2, and C is step 2. It's not step 1, 2, and 3. It's step 1, 2, and 2. Or it could be 1, 1, and 2, but it sure the fuck ain't 1, 2, and 3. So I love that. If you're not convinced of A, B, and C, you ought to reread the book to this point or throw it away. But if you are convinced, you are now at step 3. Which is you made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? That's a good question. Because your average alcoholic thinks they fucking know all about that. A brand new guy knows what their will in their life is. I've heard it 100,000 times. You know, I'm on step 3 and I turn my will and my life over every morning. Have you done step 4? No. Then you don't have a fucking clue, and you're actually on step 2. That's the truth. If you're on step 3, you ain't on step 3. You're on step 2, which is you have a little willingness to believe, because you don't understand step 3, but your average rationalizing alcoholic think they know everything, and I know what it is to turn my will and my life over. But honestly, if you're on step 3, you're not on step 3, you're on step 2. You're not on step 3 till you're done step 4, because then you got a little bit of an inclination of what step 3 actually means. What do we mean by that, and just what do we do? It's a good question. The first requirement, boom, requirement. It's an utter necessity. Is that you see that any life ran on self-will is hardly a success. So I got to be utterly convinced that my life run by me is not successful. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through this chapter. But so the first requirement is that you see that any life run on self-will will hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives may be good. I think Bill should have used intentions there, but he used motive. Whatever. Most of us try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like the actor who wants to run the whole show. Notice that he says actor who wants to run the whole show. A lot of times people say, well, I'm the director in the book and blah, blah, blah. No, you're just another actor. That's why you're the actor. You're just another person trying to control everybody. You're not even the director. You're just another person trying to control everybody. Maybe if you were the director, we'd listen to you, right? Is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put. If only people would do as he wishes, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor might be sometimes quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, dishonest, but with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So our actor that wants to get what it wants, the actor always wants things to go how they want it. And so for me, I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to manipulate everything and try to get the outcome that I want, because I'm a victim of this delusion that if I just do this all these ways and you guys just do what I want, I'm going to be happy, and so will you. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to do this kind. I'm going to be considerate of you, your feelings. I might even be patient and generous and even modest and self-sacrificing as I try to mind and emotionally manipulate you to kind of do things my way, right? And I might even look self-sacrificing. And if things actually go my way through this process, I can kind of step back and go, fuck, bro, you're a saint. You're a saint. Look at how nice you were and everything just worked out, and give yourself a pat on the back. On the other hand, if it doesn't work like that, I might turn out to be mean. I'm going to be a little indignant towards you. I'm going to get a little mean and pushy. Egotistical. I'm going to give you a little attitude because you're not really doing shit the way I want. Selfish. Dishonest. I might lie to you a little bit to try to persuade you in a certain way to kind of give me what I think it is that I need. But with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So what usually happens? Well, usually the show still doesn't come off very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself some more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. Yeah, so I'm going to admit, I'm going to be somewhat at fault, but fuck, you guys are way more to blame than me. If you guys would just have done that differently or treated me, you know what, things would all be better. Life's not treating me right, so you know what, I'm going to close my door tonight. Just don't fucking bug me tonight. I'm fucking good. And which is a form of mental and emotional manipulation. And what I want you to think about is, in this actor's story, it's way deeper than what we're talking about. And when you read the step 4 with me, when we do step 6, you're going to see some deeper level of this actor shit. And some of this actor shit goes really deep, even as far as text messaging. Think about some of the text messages that you send to somebody with the expectation that you want to fucking answer the way that you want it. And if they don't give it to you, how it makes you a little resentful. Because you've set the expectation on whatever your message is to somebody else. So what I teach my sponsees is I want you to watch your text messages and make sure there's no expectations in there, that you don't have a certain expectation for a response that you want. Because we're mind and emotionally manipulating people to draw emotional goods, because we're trying to, and if they answer us the right way, just think of how happy you are, right? Or if they answer you the wrong way, think of kind of how pissed off you are and how indignant you are. And you might have been even modest and self-sacrificing as you sent the text, but then you didn't get it the way you wanted. So then you respond with a little bit of indignation. Little bit of, now you know what, I'm not even going to answer for 2 fucking hours. I'm going to make this asshole wait. And this is all mind and emotional manipulation based on an expectation. And all you're really doing is fucking making yourself miserable, because we set expectations on people and making decisions based on self that is later placing me in a position to be hurt. But I don't really see it that way. So mind and emotional blackmail is what we do. And it's done to us. But once you start noticing where you do it, you can start seeing it where people are doing it too. And being the watcher of watching where other people are doing it, you start seeing you doing it way more. And that's where sponsorship really starts showing some of that deeper rooted shit. Because it's easy to see the branches. It's easy to see that I might have anger, but where's the anger stemming from? It's stemming from all these subtle things way below the surface. So what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself still more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. Fuck, there's the results right there. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when he's trying to be kind? Oh, I love that. So with my newer guys who don't really understand the program and we get here, I'm I want you to be aware when you're trying to be kind to someone, I want you to step back and go, what am I trying to get out of this? And you know how many times I've had a sponsee go, you know what, I remembered you said if I'm trying to be kind, to stop and think about what am I trying to get out of this? And you wouldn't be surprised how many people say, you know what, I was actually self-seeking something. It's an amazing, this is a great barometer, this little question here. So think about it. When you're trying to be kind or you're being overly kind, stop and go, what's the fucking motive? Because I'm going to drive it on my intention. I'm going to convince myself on my intention every time because I'm being nice. But underneath that intention, what's the motive? I want validation. I want this. I want that. I want something. That is the epitome of self-seeking. Is he not a victim? The biggest fucking line in the big book, man. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Massive shit right there. That is the line that if you start understanding will change your life. To me, it's the most underrated line in the literature, period. Nobody talks about this. And to me, it's the most important thing in the big book. Because I'm not focused on the substance with this line. I'm focused on my own behavior. I'm focused on a victim. I know I'm tricked. And once I become conscious that I've been tricked, and for anyone out there who doesn't understand this line, a victim means I've been tricked or I've been duped. Well, we've been tricked and we've been duped by society at large. My ideas and my belief systems that were never really my own. I learned them all from somewhere. And I've seen them all my life all over the place, so they're in me. But are they really me? Are they really mine? Fuck, it's a good question to ask yourself. And then the delusion and an idea. It's an idea that I hold to be true, but it's not really true. And I'm going to read something here off my phone. It's about a delusion. So a delusion is a belief that is clearly false and that indicates an abnormality in the affected person's content of thought. The false belief is not accounted for by the person's cultural or religious background or his or her level of intelligence. That shit doesn't matter. The key feature of a delusion is to the degree which a person is convinced that this belief is true. A person with the delusion will hold firmly to the belief regardless of evidence to the contrary. A person with a delusion is absolutely convinced that this delusion is real. Well, what kind of delusions do we suffer from in this area? I think some of the ones that we suffer from are, I'm convinced that the right amount of money is going to make me happy. But it never fucking does. When you look at the evidence to the contrary, if you've had some money, I want you to really ask yourself, has it actually made you truly happy? Or did it just give you some relief? Did it just give you some type of validation? Or if you actually got into a relationship, and how many of you have kind of pinpointed a certain person and went, you know what, that's the person that's going to make me happy and I can already see myself with them, blah, blah, blah. And then you get with them. And then time goes by and you're just like, you're still empty. Or you make them the sole object of your life and that is the only thing that makes you happy. So these are some of the delusions. These ideas that are clearly false. And when you look at the evidence of these things, and you actually look at the evidence, that's why inventories are so important. Without me looking at the patterns and the inventory and the truth, the rigorous honesty truth of these situations, I'm going to delude myself because I'm a victim of this delusion that I can rest. And what does the word rest mean? Rest means grab, snatch. I like the word pry, something out of life. And let's say I'm in a relationship and I want more love from my partner. I'm going to mentally and emotionally manipulate them because I want more love. I want what I want. So I'm going to maybe be a little dishonest and say, I've had a tough day at work, even though I had the best day at work. And, I'm going to go and buy her flowers, even though, I just want something. Not really buying her flowers from the goodness of my heart. I want some special treatment. And there's a lot of these little subtle behaviors that we don't even really notice, that are decisions based on self that will later place you in a position to be hurt because they actually build resentment when you don't get your way. If I buy my partner flowers thinking, she's going to give me accolades and give me hugs and maybe I'll get laid tonight off these flowers and Maybe she had a terrible day and she fucking doesn't even see him. And then I sit there fucking all resentful and pissed off. And then my emotional blackmail, she can feel. And then she does more. And then the next thing you know, we're having a big fight over this. Over what? Over nothing. Over fucking imaginary shit. Right? The shit goes deep. It's hilarious. It's not hilarious. But that is the delusion right there that will save your life, and it will allow you to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. And for anyone who's in relationships here and your partner's not, I'm just going to say some shit here today that maybe, it's disconcerting. But as you grow in this program, and if your partner doesn't grow, you're going to change and your partner's not going to change. So the relationships change. Because two people, water finds its own level when two people are meeting in the world of the material, and people find like-minded people. But as you start leveling up in this program, and I've seen it time and time and time and again, two people will come into the program together, one will take off and one won't. Their relationships don't last. Or one person comes into the program because their family did an intervention, and then the husband helps the wife get into the program, and then the wife takes root in this program and levels up and ends up leaving her husband. Or vice versa. Why? Because once you separate too far in these levels of consciousness, it's a tough deal, man. Because you're starting to listen to your true self, and you've always listened to your untrue self, which is what bonded people for years and years. Trying to cater to each other, both playing the actor to each other to keep each other happy. But once you start listening to true self, things really change. And I don't say that to scare anybody, I'm just saying it to prepare yourself, because it's the truth. And if you really want to be with that person, you got to have these honest chats and say, you know what? Fuck, somehow try to level up with me. Because if you level up and they don't, I'm just going to read it once more because it's so important. Is he not really a self-seeker when he's trying to be kind? Is he not really a victim of a delusion that he can rest, pride, happiness, and satisfaction out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The preacher who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not these people mostly concerned with themselves, their resentments, and their own self-pity? Yeah, that line is gold, because most of us are only concerned with ourselves, our own resentments, our own self-pity. And these are the things we got to really look into and let go of. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. So this is what I want to talk about here. This is the root of the trouble. Okay, I work with sponsees daily. I've worked with them for years. I've worked with fucking men and women. This is it. Okay? A lot of people, when they get here, go, I'm not selfish. I'm not self-centered. I'm actually kind. I'm actually considerate. I'm actually all these other things. And then they spend a little bit of time here, do some work, and go, holy fuck, I'm ever selfish. Because it's the truth. We're diluting ourselves because we can't see true motive. We can't see that I'm afraid to lose something, so I'm going to do all these little manipulation games to not lose it. I'm afraid I'm not going to get something, so I'm going to do all these manipulation games to try to get something. This is the selfish self-centeredness. It's always driven by two fears. Fears I'm going to not get something I want, or fear that I'm going to lose something I already have. And once you stick around a little while and you become open to this, because the pride doesn't really want you to look at it like this. But again, it's like accepting you're an alcoholic. Once you accept you're an alcoholic, you can start to recover. Once you accept selfishness, self-centeredness might be the root of your troubles, like it is with like 99% of us alcoholics, then you got a chance to work on it. And then the gifts start coming, because this is actually a gift to understand this stuff. Because our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. We get closer to God once we start being able to see our motives properly. So this is very important to anybody new or struggling or coming back. And this is my specialty. So just so you know, I fucking love this part of the program, because this is where true growth happens, understanding this shit. That we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear. And if you look at this as directions, driven by 100 forms of fear, driven, think of that. If you're a human being, you're driven by 100 forms of fear. Put that into context. It's not like something you just skim over. It's something that needs to sink in and go, holy fuck, I probably am. Of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. I'm not actually going out and stepping on the toes of them, but I'm stepping on their toes in subtle ways that I can't really see. And then they retaliate. See, sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. I'm the guy standing on the corner and I get hit in the face by some stranger and go, fuck, I'm just an innocent bystander. But no, I've done a whole bunch of shit, but I'm not able to see it. So there's a whole seemingly without provocation. I just love that, seemingly. But there's provocation there, trust me. But we invariably find that sometime in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. And that's very complex. I make some decisions based on self 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I don't know how long have I been here? 5. I used for about 6, so 11 years ago or so. 11, 12 years ago. I decide, to make some decisions based on self. And mind you, the way I got started smoking crack wasn't typical, but I started it. And then I made these decisions based on self to keep doing it. Well, those decisions based on self 11, 12 years ago, I'm still paying for it today in many respects. But some of those decisions actually help me grow, because I don't look at them as negative detriments in my life anymore. And I can make decisions based on self. Like, my daughter got into a bit of an issue last summer, and then my ex-wife told me, you know what, Bill, you can't just leave her alone. Don't tell her anything. Don't tell her what to do. Don't tell her she needs to move out. Don't tell her she needs to get a job. Don't tell her any of these things. And I'm like, why? She needs to fucking get a job. She needs to get out. She's 18 years old. And the deal was, if she wasn't working when she turned 18, then my child support isn't paid anymore. So I listened to my ex-wife and I listened to the psychiatrist and psychologist, and I didn't say anything. Why? I believed that I needed to say something to my daughter, and I needed to push her and get her going in her own life. But I didn't. Why? Because I wanted to keep other people happy. So I'm making a decision based on self to keep my ex-wife happy, to keep my mom happy, to keep my daughter happy. And how did that work out for me? Fucking terrible. Terrible. My daughter ended up taking so much advantage of nobody saying anything and telling her anything that she ended up started harming her sister and her mom, and not like physically, but mind and emotionally. And then I had enough of it this year, and I said, you know what? Shannon, who's my ex, my mom, and her mom, I said, you know what, you three? I don't give a fuck what you say. I am not fucking putting up with this shit anymore. I'm kicking her ass out of the house. So I kicked my daughter out of the house. But the decision that I made based on self to people please everybody a year earlier had later placed me in a position to be hurt. And I often hurt others when I'm in that position. So how was I hurt? Well, I was hurt because I had to spend another $1,000 a month for 12 more months. And I had to eventually get pissed off at Shannon, my ex-wife, and my mom and Shannon's mom. And I had to eventually have it out with my fucking daughter. and like get really angry at her and tell her to get the fuck out of the house. And to me, those were decisions based on self, and I never listened to my true inner resource, and my resource told me that she needed to be out back then. So that was one decision based on self. But they're always, man. I can always make these decisions based on self. So I usually talk about this at step 6, and I'll talk about it at step 6 too. But when I was 14 months sober, I had met a girl who was 6 months sober, and we ended up getting in a relationship, and we weren't supposed to have the relationship. I didn't want to really be in a relationship. And she was only 6 months, and I kind of knew that you weren't supposed to, mess around with people under a year. But whatever, I did. And I was fucking pretty new too, but that's no excuse, I guess, because I knew in my inner resource that it was the wrong thing to do, but I did it anyway. And I remember the night that I was going to go meet up with this woman. I was driving home, and because I had dropped her off. There was a whole group of us hanging out one night, and I dropped her off at home, and then I left, and then she sent me a text, and I was like, holy shit, really? And then I remember going, fuck, and then I sent her a text back, and then it was on, and I'm just like, holy fuck, this is no good. So I pulled my truck over, and I'm on the side of the road on like McKnight Boulevard, Northeast Calgary. And I'm just like praying, and I'm like, fuck, God's will, Bill's will. Because I knew it wasn't right. But I wanted what I wanted. So I was like, fuck, God's will, Bill's will, God's will, Bill's will. And I'm like, here's Bill's will, fucking here's God's will. Fucking God's will's out the window. Rolled down my window, threw God's will out. Fucking put Bill's will in his pocket and fucking drove down to her house. And then it was on. Had a great night. And then the deal was, because we made a deal, right? Had to make a deal. The deal was, we'll do this for forever. Just don't fucking fall in love. Anyway, so a month goes by, and I'm just like, we're hanging out, and I'm like, fuck, are you falling in love with me? This is getting a little weird. She's like, yeah, I am. I can't help it. And I'm like, fuck, that's not the way this is supposed to go. So then I break up with her. Even though we weren't even going out anyway, I had to break up with her. So I'm making decisions based on self all fucking the way through this. Why? Because I want what I want, right? She's doing it too, but I'm doing it. And then, so I dump her, and then within 2 weeks, she's relapsed. Well, the problem with this was I was confiding in my friend who was not God-centered and wasn't 12-stepped, and she was a female. And she took all this information and fucking went and spread it all over AA and fucking tried to ruin my reputation, whatever reputation I had at 14 months, which was a decent one. But she fucking was trying to destroy me, and she just turned on me like fuck. And it just killed me, man. And then I was getting like shunned and fucking attitude from people. And every now and then today even, every now and then, I've done a really good job at fucking turning this around because I learned a lot of lessons through that. And over the years, I've really fucking implemented some heavy changes. And I walk the walk and talk the talk. But every now and then, somebody that doesn't understand will come and still say something to me. And so that decision based on self, fucking like 5 years ago, has still later placed me in a position to be hurt. So I still suffer ramifications from that decision, but I can't really do anything about it. All I can do is what I can do today, and I move forward today and just try to be fucking good today and bring God into these things today. So decisions based on self, man. Very subtle, very sneaky, very tricky. But with the proper guidance and the proper willingness to really want to see, this shit levels you up, right? Really levels you up. So I'm going to start right there where it talks about sore troubles. But I'm going to go back a line because I need to reread that line. But invariably, we find that sometime in the past we have made decisions based on self, which have later placed us in a position to be hurt. So one of the main things in my life is if I feel like shit, typically, doesn't matter when, if I feel like bad, I got to stop and analyze, why do I feel like shit? I'm going to say 8 times out of 10, it's because I've made a decision based on self. So I need to kind of recalibrate and follow the breadcrumbs back and find out where that decision based on self was. Why did I make the decision? Where is it? And it might have been a couple hours ago. I might know exactly where it is. Or maybe it was made without me knowing because I was basing my good intention on something. But was I trying to get a validation somewhere, sometime? Through a text, through a conversation? Like, usually for myself, I can always find it through following the breadcrumbs. And if I don't reveal why I feel like shit through a decision based on self, then it's usually a feeling that I've gotten out of morbid reflection. So then I'm going down a rabbit hole of morbid reflection, which can also be based as a decision based on self. Because now I'm going into self-pity. Oh, poor me. I don't have this, I don't have that. Or whatever it is. Right? And typically, whatever the feeling is that I'm feeling is based in a fear. It's based out of a fear. Fear of social judgment, typically. Fear of not being accepted by somebody or a group of people. And fear of wanting to look like something else. And to me, the best combatant to most of this shit, almost everything I'm talking about, is on page 68 in the big book, which is our fear inventory, our fear process. Because everything stems from fear. And that whole page, if I follow it and I follow the directions, not the theory of it, but follow the directions, it actually places me back on my feet and gives me purpose again. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. Love that. They arise out of ourselves. It arises out of me. My insecurities deep within me are usually what allow me to make these decisions based on self. Because I'm in a fear of not getting something I want, or I'm afraid of losing something I already have, and it arises out of me. And the alcoholic is almost the most extreme example that could be found of self-will run riot. So we're not the only example of self-will run riot, but we are one of the most extreme examples of self-will run riot. Other normal people are also examples of self-will run riot. We make more of a mess out of it than fucking anybody. And this is part of what differentiates us and sets us apart. You know, it's not only that I have an allergy. You know, I handle shit in my head and I make shit up in my head like no one's fucking business. Other people aren't making shit up in my head like they're not doing it like I am, right? I can have a quick thought and by the end of the day, it's fucking totally like the world's ending. Or in the morning, I can tell you, you know, I got the worst idea ever in the morning to have a drink, but by fucking 4 o'clock, it's the best idea I ever fucking had. And that can go with anything. Oh, I got to stay away from women in the morning. All week long, I'm like, okay, I'm staying away from women. I'm going to spend 6 months single. And by 5 o'clock, I'm fucking swiping right on Tinder. Right? And I got POF on the other phone. And I'm fucking like, that's not my life. It's an example. But that's how easy it can spin, man. And I've seen it. And usually with my male sponsees, that Tinder shit and then the POF shit, that's the shit that fucking takes them out. Because they're fucking, it creates dishonesty. And that shit will take you out every time. Most could be found of self-will run riot. Though he usually doesn't think so. That's it. But we usually don't think so. Why? Because you can't see self from self. You will never see the problem with the problem. And you can't see self with self. Once you're around this program for a while, you're able to start to see self. But usually you'll see self from the grandiose side of self. But when you get into self-pity or victim mentality, self is so deceptive. From the victim or the self-pity, poor me perspective, self is hard to see. Which is why it's so imperative for us to use pillars and sponsors. Because we can't see self with self. And we're objective. We're trying to grow, so we're trying to be objective. But you can't always see it. That's why step 4 is fact-finding, fact-facing, truth about stock and trade, effort to discover damaged or unsaleable goods and discard them without regret. Well, I can't just do that on my own. That's why I can't do a step 4 and 5 on my own. That's why I need a sponsor, for fuck's sakes. Because my truth is way different than I'm going to ever see on the paper, even if I write it out. Because my subconscious pride doesn't want to admit to some of that shit. So if I've already done a 4 and 5, part of my growth in my program is I better pick up the fucking phone and start asking my sponsor some questions about how I feel. Where has this actually worked? Right? Where has it worked? It's worked on page 84 in the big book. It's worked on page 84 in the big book. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That's my decisions based on self or my crazy thinking about me, because it's all about me. When these crop up, not if they crop up, when they crop up, we ask God at once to remove it, because God's the solution. Boom. We talk to someone immediately. I have to fucking pick up the phone and get an objective perspective of my current situation, because my fucking brain is the problem. And I will create shit that's not true. And I need somebody else's perspective. And I need them to help level me up or see the truth, find some damaged or unsaleable good and discard it without regret. And then I resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I can help. Then I start thinking about you. So it's all worked in step 10. Okay, so he usually doesn't think so. Above everything. This paragraph is just loaded with shit. Above everything. Nowhere else in the big book does it say above everything. But here it does. Why? Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. Boom. That's important, man. And I've worked with so many sponsees that are now dead. And this line is fucking why they're dead. Because selfishness fucking kills us. Because the men that I'm particularly thinking about in my head, they all died because their inability to be honest and develop a relationship with God, they made a woman their God. Why? Because they were so broken on the inside, they self-seeked to the fucking extreme because they couldn't get full inside by themselves with God. So they needed something from the outside so they couldn't stop self-seeking and taking. And they weren't really picky on what they were doing because they were so broken because they've never healed. And when you're broken and you haven't healed, you're only going to find broken and unhealed. So these guys in particular, there's like 3 of them rolling through my head. They died over overdoses based on going out over women because they couldn't fucking get healthy on their own. And there's a good reason why we say that you stay away from the opposite sex for a fucking year. It's not to be sadistic. It's because you don't even know who the fuck you are. And when you've been around long enough, you see the underlying reasons that people fucking need to fill the voids within themselves. And it will always come through a woman. And then once the sex relation part happens, like physical contact of sex, because sex desire is the most powerful desire a human being has. If you can take that desire, that energy, and use it into like your recovery, it has such powerful effect in your recovery. But when you release the energy through a physical form, it depletes willingness and willpower. Like it's physiological shit that people don't understand. And they try to figure it out with their mind, but you will never. You will only figure this shit out if you study it, like I have, and then you see enough guys fucking fail because of what I'm talking about. And I never studied at first. I just kept seeing failure, women, failure, women, death. And then me and Jesse would get together and he'd be like, yeah, same thing. And then I did more studying and I found out about the human energy of sex relation. And by depleting it through physical form, it depletes willingness and willpower. So whatever the target is, which is being sober, that target gets really fucking foggy and blurry once you start having sex. But because your disease wants out, it won't go out through alcohol or drugs anymore because those aren't options. The next way it wants out is through sex. It's the number one way it wants out next. But if you can take that energy and focus it into your recovery, it really ramps up your recovery. But logically, that doesn't make sense to your average guy who's fucking horny as a, whatever. He just wants to get his rocks off. But the problem, he gets his rocks off, he's probably drunk. Like, that's just the reality of this shit. It's not just men either, women too. So he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of the selfishness. We must, or it kills us. Who makes that possible? God makes that possible. And there is no way of entirely getting rid of self without him, without his aid. You may have moral and philosophical convictions galore, but you cannot live up to them, even though you would like to. Neither can you reduce your self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on your own power. You must have God's help. In that paragraph alone, it tells me 3 times, I can't do this without God. And what we're talking about is we're talking about relinquishment of defects of character, which is the real progress in spiritual growth. So we can't just relieve these things, these selfish, self-seeking defects of character without his help. We must have God's help. So original manuscript, this is one of the main reasons I'm using it, is because of exactly what I'm going to read here right now. And when I'm working with somebody who's a retread, who can't get this program, can't get this program, and they don't know why, this original manuscript told me a lot about directions. And then we get to this part right here. And this is the part right here that even people who have been in the program, but they're not really doing that well, but they're sober, that's why they come to me specifically, or Jesse, is because of the shit that I'm going to read to you here right now. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, period, quit playing God yourself, period, it doesn't fucking work. That's what it says. It doesn't say fuck, but this is the how and the why of it. First of all, period, quit playing God yourself, period. It doesn't work, period. And when I'm working with a guy that can't get sober, I'm looking them in the eye and I'm telling you, quit fucking playing God, bro, because it doesn't work. How has that worked for you? And this is very stern directive to these men that I'm working with, and some women. Because if they don't get this shit kills people. And this idea of God is not an idea. It's not just a concept. I'm going to read something to you. This is cornerstone. So in We Agnostics the other day, I told you to circle the word cornerstone. Upon this simple cornerstone, what's the cornerstone? And a belief in God. Just a belief in God. A wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And then we got fast forward to Bill's story, or the We Agnostics part of Bill's story. His cornerstone was fixed in place, meaning he had turned his will and his life over to the care of God. So what is the word cornerstone in definition in the Cambridge Dictionary? Something of great importance that everything else depends on. Everything depends on this relationship with God. Which is why I'm hammering this home to somebody who can't get sober. And then keystone. We're going to talk about keystone, but I'm going to bring it forward right now. Keystone. In the new and triumphant arts that we're going to pass through to freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from me, bondage of self, my selfish self-centeredness. I need to be rid of that shit. I need to pass through this freedom. And the keystone is the one that goes at the top of the arch that locks all the other bricks in place. And what is the keystone? Something on which associated things depend upon for support. The most important part of the plan or idea, etc., on which everything else depends. So we got 2 things here. We got the cornerstone, God, and then we have the fucking concept of selfish self-centeredness has to be gone. And I have to have God in this area. 2 really important things. This whole program lies on both those things. Okay? So this is the how and the why of it. First of all, quit playing God. It doesn't work, period. Next, decide that hereafter in this drama of life, think about that, the drama of life. You're the actor. It's a drama of life. Everyone out there is wearing a fucking mask anyway. Everyone's the actor. No one's real. Out there in the real world, so-called, is not the real world. Okay? It's a big play. It's a big act. Next, decide that hereafter in this drama of life, that God is going to be your director. He is the principal. You are to be his agent. He is the father. You are his child. Get that simple relationship straight, period. That's it. It's like, get that relationship straight, period. There's no more. What does it say in the big book? Most good ideas are simple. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple. No, I like original manuscript. He is the father, you are his child. Get that simple relationship straight, period. And that's the way it is with the sponsees I work with. And this is like, I don't know. I'm kind of getting worked up here because this is the deal, man. This is the fucking deal right here. This is the shit that changed my life. And this is the shit that changes people's life right here. Most good ideas are simple. And this concept, it's only a concept right now. It's just an ideal. But the action of this concept will fucking change your life. Because in your head, it's just a decision. Now let's take the decision and make this truth, right? This concept is the keystone to new and triumphant arch which you pass to freedom. Pass through freedom. Freedom from bondage of self. Because I am the problem. Which is why it's imperative that you be convinced that selfish self-centeredness is the root of the trouble. And I say be convinced that that's the problem, and why I spend so much time there is because later as we keep going, I'm going to show you how important you need to be convinced of that is. Because it actually makes this decision and this walking through this doorway, this keystone, this arch, reality. Okay? When you sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. Well, what's the position I'm taking? That now I work for God. God is now the boss. Not me. Not theoretical. This is why I tell everyone when I share in meetings, this program is not theoretical. This idea that I turn over to God? No. It's a fucking reality. Try to do it the best we can. It's not a theory. People that take this program as theory fucking get drunk. People that take this program, this part right here, as truth, they don't get drunk, and then they level up to a level of life to the best, better than the best they ever knew. So when we sincerely took this position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. You have a new employer. Being all powerful, he must necessarily provide what you need if you keep close to him and perform his work well. Boom. Okay, so I have a new employer. So anyone who works anywhere, okay, you might have a job somewhere, and people say, well, where do you work? Well, I work for, Frankie and Johnny's Plumbing. I work for XYZ Framing. I work for Alberta Health Services. No, bro. When you sincerely take this position, you don't work for any of those people. That is the role that you're assigned. And you play the role of the worker when you're at work. But you really work for God. So you bring God's will into wherever you say that you work. And you don't work for God. That is the place that gives you money so that you can live. That's not where you work. You work for God. But society tells me that I work for ABC. I work for Johnny's Plumbing. I work here, I work there. No. When you sincerely take this position, that you work for God, life changes. And when you go home and you're dealing with your kids, you are now playing a new role you're assigned. What's the role? You're playing a fucking father. You're playing a mother. You're playing a wife. You're playing a husband. And you bring God's version of God's will into everything you do at home. Why? Because that's the role you're playing, and you work for God at home. And when you go to your baseball game and your baseball team and your figure skating team, now you're playing another role. And you bring the vision of God's will everywhere you go. And so if I go to work, I bring God's will to work. And do I do it perfectly? No. But I will fucking do the best I can every day. And remarkable things will happen. So, when you sincerely take this position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. You have a new employer. Being all-powerful God, he must necessarily provide what you need. It's a guarantee. It is a guarantee. God will provide you what you need. But you got to do two things. Okay? I have a new employer. God's going to pay me. What is he going to pay me with? He's going to pay me with a roof over my head. He's going to pay me with a fucking vehicle with some gas in its tank. He's going to pay me with some clothes on my back. He's going to pay me with food in my belly. He's going to pay me for sure with the certain things that I guaranteed I need to live. That's a promise right here in the big book. But I got to do two things. I got to stay close to him. Prayer, meditation, altruism. And I got to perform his work well. Altruism, helping others. Where can I be of service? So I'm going to give you my experience for the last 5 years. I was 6 months sober. I started chairing my first meeting. I was 6 months sober. I started sponsoring. I have not stopped sponsoring. I have not stopped doing service. And I have had many instances where I didn't have enough money for whatever it was. And I always got the money at the last second. Or in a way that you could never imagine. Or I was given something. Or like I have so many stories of God doing for me miraculous miracles in my life. And I know that it's because I performed his work well and I stay close to him. And he's always given me what I needed. So for me to step from bridge to shore, I think I've stepped from bridge to shore in almost every area of my life now. And I've taken some major blind leaps of faith. Why? Because God, it started out as a belief. And then it turned into some faith. Because I looked at all these things happening in my life. And I'm like, those aren't coincidences. I got to believe that that should happen based on my faith. So it was this faith with a track record. That it started building more faith. And then over the time, it's just become trust. And when I put my whole trust in God, fucking shit happens. Shit happens. When you let go of conditions and you just allow God to do what he needs to do. Like, fuck, I'm just getting chills even talking about it because my life is riddled with it. And I work with a lot of sponsees and I see them giving up their will based on their belief that I'm telling them the truth. And people will be like, okay, man, I'm going to fucking trust you. And then it happens. But what do you got to understand about God's will and God is everything or God is nothing? God is the seemingly good in your life. And the word seemingly is important. And God is the seemingly bad in your life. Because you know what? I don't actually know what's been good for me or what's been bad for me. But I can tell you the shit that seemed the worst was actually the best life lessons. And when I look back at my life, I can only connect the dots in my life looking backwards. And I can go, thank you, God, for keeping me away from that. Because that's what I fucking thought I wanted so bad. And God is only seemingly good seemingly good and seemingly bad, man. It's only seemingly good and seemingly bad. If you're living in God's grace, what is God's grace? Is God's grace the only the good shit that you feel in your life? No, man. It's fucking everything. It's everything. So when you get the attitude of gratitude and you start looking at life from like, you don't know, man. Everything's your teacher. Everything's my teacher today. And I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I know one thing that's going to happen tomorrow. If I wake up and my eyes open, I start with gratitude and I thank God for putting me where he put me. And then I go to gratitude right away. And then I let the day flow from there. And I set my first 15 minutes of my mind in the right frame of mind with God. And then all through the day, if shit crops in and it's negative, I fucking turn it around and I say, what can I learn from this? And it happens like that every day. Right till the end of the night. And then I don't know what's going to happen the next day. And it's so much easier than me trying to fucking manage my whole life. trying to figure out the next 10 years of my life. No. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to fucking die because I trust God. But I'm sure going to probably die if I trust myself. That's never really works out for me. Living on my own devices. Self-seeking. Self-doing this and self-doing that. So yeah, this is a serious decision. And it's not an easy one to take. And I'm imploring you to really, really give this decision like serious prayer and contemplation and trust God. Trust God. And this happens over time. This happens over time. It's not going to happen your first time through. In step 3 in the original, in the 12 and 12, it talks about when I first do step 3, it's my first attempt to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. In fact, the whole effectiveness of this AA program, or quality of my life, if you will say, depends on how well and earnestly I have come to this decision. So this decision is done over time, and to me it's really, really done in your step 6 and understanding 6, work through a step 10. So I got to stay close to Him, and I got to perform His work well. Established on such a footing. Here's some promises if I do it like this. I will become less and less interested in myself. There's a barometer. Am I still interested only in myself, or am I interested in somebody else? In my little plans and designs. More and more you become interested in seeing what you can contribute to life. Am I still fucking trying to fill my own life with all the shit that I want? Or am I looking at what I can contribute to life? As you feel new power flow in, as you enjoy some peace of mind, as you discover you can face life successfully, as you become conscious of His presence, and you begin to lose your fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter, you will have been reborn. So as you feel this new power flow in, as you enjoy some real peace of mind, as you discover you can face life successfully, with truth about yourself. You don't need to people please. You don't need to manage and manipulate anybody. You're in touch with selfish self-centeredness, and you're relinquishing that. And this comes over some time. You'll feel that power flow in, and you will enjoy some peace of mind because you're not trying to manipulate anybody and then having your mind not at peace over doing it because your subconscious knows what you're doing. As you discover you can face life successfully, as you become conscious of His presence. And that's really important. As you're relinquishing the selfishness, you become conscious of His presence. Any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults has indeed come a long way spiritually. It's relinquishment of selfish self-centeredness, which is what the whole premise of step 6 is about. You begin to lose your fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. You have been reborn. Yeah, you lose your fear of today, tomorrow, because you don't need it like that anymore. And you're reborn. I remember I was about a year sober, and I read that line again working with Sponsy, and I'm like, holy fuck, I feel like I have a new chance at life. I don't even get my old life back. I'm reborn. I get a new chance. Like the doctor's opinion talks about recreating our lives. It's not about old life. Because once you get a taste of God, like real God, your life is different forever. Once you taste God, nothing else will do. Okay, here we go. So we are now at step 3. Many of us said to our makers, we understood Him, God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do Thy will. Take away these difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. So let's look at that prayer for a second. So when I work with sponsees, this prayer will change your life. Okay, this prayer has so much depth. When your heart and your soul are into what this prayer said, then you better be ready. It's like, God, I offer myself to Thee. I'm giving an offering of myself. All of me. to God, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. This is a fucking renovation project. I need to be renovated or I will drink again. I need a renovation. And when you think of a renovation on a house, you get a crew of guys going into an old house and they start slamming sledgehammers and cutting walls and they rip the place apart. It's totaled. What's left standing in a full renovation of a house? Just the 2x4s of where the walls were, the ceiling beams, and there's nothing left except a skeleton. And that's kind of the same as what we're offering to God. Build with me and do with me as thou wilt. The problem through this building process is relieve me of the bondage of self. Well, that's the main problem here. Being convinced that any life run on self-will is hardly a success. Selfish self-centeredness is the root of the troubles. Relieve me of that. But then God can be the only one to do that, because I can't do that myself. Take away my difficulties. These are the things that are still hanging on that blocked me from God. These are my defects of character. These are the things I need to relinquish. But the problem with people when they say this prayer is they don't really understand the impact that this prayer has in the universe. When you say this shit with intent, with deep intent in your heart and your soul that you really want to change, the universe listens. And there's a lot of pain in the change. So you got to be ready, man. God is everything or God is nothing. And through the pain of the change, hopefully you got enough balls and you got enough God, and you're trusting this process that you can hang on. Because the honest truth is your average person isn't going to hang on. There's a line in step 10 in the 12 and 12. The pains of drinking had to come before sobriety, and inner turmoil before serenity. So the inner turmoil part of this change is fucking painful. Relinquishing old habits and defects and things that you did, these manipulation tactics, and relinquishing these things and holding on to things from outside yourself to fill yourself that we've been doing for years. It's not easy to give up. Takes tough, man. You got to work tough at this. This is why I say do what's easy, make your life hard. Or you do what's hard and make your life easy, because God will make your life easy. You living it on your own is going to make it hard. And these things, as they change, as you're rebuilding yourself through this construction process, this renovation, God build with me and do with me. That's the real deal right there. And by no means is this the decision. This is not a done deal right here. This is only step 3. I still got step 4 and step 5, and I still got to learn what step 6 is so that I can fully commit to God for step 7. And the fully commitment to God in step 7 might happen in your first round of steps, but it didn't for me. It happened about 1.5 years into this process through a lot of the build with me and do with me as thou will pain, sheer pain. With some good shit in there too, don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad. Well, I don't know what's bad or good for me, but it didn't all feel bad. And then what are we doing this for? Take away my difficulties. Take away these defects of character. So that victory over them sounds like there's going to be a fight. Take away these difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness. So a fight, there's always pain in a fight. And I got to be victorious over them. Why? So that I may better do thy will. So that I can bear witness of those I will help. Well, where does this fight happen? The principle behind step 10 is perseverance. And what's the definition of perseverance? Essentially, it's fighting through. And what am I fighting through? I'm actually fighting through my defects of character, which is the main premise of 6. Step 6. Willingness to fight through these things that block entry of God into my life and that make my life more miserable than it needs to be. But it's actually worked through the perseverance part of step 10. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God. Boom. It's all done in step 10. That's why I keep always talking about step 6 and step 10. Because it's so important for you guys to understand. This is where, in my opinion, the rooms don't give you the proper knowledge and information. All we're talking about is the substance at every fucking meeting. We're talking about doing a step 4 and 5, and I'm talking about 20 years ago when I did my first step 4 and 5. What am I doing for a step 4 and 5 today? Well, I'm following a step 10, right? It's important for you to understand your step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 today. Never mind 20 fucking years ago. Who cares about 20 years ago? What's happening today in that step 4 to 9? It's done in step 10. But then you bring up a step 10 in the rooms, and everyone's sharing, and old timers included. Oh, I fucking did some step 10s this week. I promptly admitted when I was wrong. You know what? For you newcomers, if you fucking go with step 10 as promptly admitting what you're wrong, you're going to be fucking drunk. And you're going to be miserable for a long time if you stay sober. Because it is not about promptly admitting when you're fucking wrong. The real step 10 is in the big book. It's not on the wall. And one of my biggest fucking things that I do in this program is I'm about step 10 in the meetings, man. I can't wait to bring step 10 up in a meeting so I can crush all that bullshit I hear, because it's fucking wrong. And when we talk about directions, that's the directions. That is a theory, because no one understands what the fuck they're talking about sometimes in the rooms, because they've been around so long. That's what they think. And then they teach new people that. And we talk about in step 7, to be willing to work for humility takes most of us a long time. It doesn't have to take a long time. Let's follow the directions, and it takes a short time. And in a short time, I have a sincere desire to seek and do God's will. As I follow the directions, the principle is always presented through the result. I don't need to self-will the principles into my life. The principle is the result of the directions when followed. Boom. And then I don't fight anyone or anything, even alcohol. Very important stuff. Very important. And then as I help teach you guys and give you guys the knowledge so that one day you'll remember, holy fuck, it's on step 10 and all I'm hearing is about people talking about admitting they're wrong. No. Then you carry the message, the real message that this book talks about. Because this is the solution. And this is why I love doing it. So that you guys can take this and level people up out there. And if I see you in a meeting and I'm hearing you share on the truth of the book, man, my juices just I'm on fire. I just love watching people carry the real message of Alcoholics Anonymous, And I've shared about this too before. I think, a lot of times we carry half the message. Does anyone know what half of the message that we carry sometimes that is, we don't need to carry the mess part of the message. Let's carry the whole message. But sometimes we just carry the mess. What kind of hope are you getting out of the mess? It's group therapy. What's group therapy? Everyone shares their problems. It ain't about sharing the problems. It's about sharing a solution. It's about sharing the solution. I can relate my problems, but what am I doing now today to fix it? We thought well before taking the step, making sure we were ready. Well, I think Bill should have put that at the top of the prayer. It's a little late now, Bill. That we could last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. I like that. At last, abandon ourselves utterly to Him. It just kind of highlights everything I've just been talking about in this step. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it's better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made an effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. So I like that, man. As you work with somebody new and you give them the momentum of this program up to this point, especially step 2 and step 3, that really starts lighting a person up. And sometimes an effect was felt, a very great one. But a new guy will mistaken this for true religious feeling. They will mistaken it as a spiritual awakening and the spiritual awakening. And then the drink problem seems like it's kind of been removed, but they won't move on the step anymore. They won't go further because this prayer and the leveling up through what you just did feels so good to them that they feel like that's enough. And they're scared of step 4. Because part of our message that we carried, the mass, is that step 4 is scary. I don't know. It wasn't scary for me. It was actually exciting for me. And I think part of our message that we carry is we don't want to scare people away from step 4 because that's where the solution begins. We want to give them the hope of step 4. That this is the gold, man. This is where the gold begins. And we, back in... And there's a solution. Talks about it. None of us like the self-searching, leveling our pride, admissions of our shortcomings, which this process requires for its successful consummation. That's step 4 and 5. That's where my solution begins. It doesn't even begin in step 1, 2, or 3. It begins in step 4 and 5. 1's an admission. 2 is an acceptance that maybe. 3 means fucking nothing till step 4 is done. So 4 is where it begins. So I think the message, that we should try to carry in our rooms is, hope that this is a great step. There's a little bit of pain there, but it's already happened. Let's get on with it. This is the step that changed my life, actually. A lot of guys will relapse at step after the step 3. And to me, like I've already said tonight, you're never on step 3 unless you're done step 4.